CEO's cruelty exposed, how a homeless boy risked everything to make his mute daughter speak for. Daniel sat on the cold bench, his eyes fixed on the playground in the park across the street, where laughter rang like a taunt in his ears. Every giggle and shout reminded him of Lily, her delicate hands grasping at shadows where words should flow. Once, he had been a graphic designer with bright prospects, the world swirling with potential in the curves of his sketches. Now, he was just a father fighting against the tide of despair. A single thought flickered dangerously in his mind: what if his art could bring her voice back? He was wrestling with a dilemma: expose the corrupt CEO who had ruined their lives, or keep his head down and protect Lily from the fallout. The shadows of their reality pressed against him, cold and unyielding. In his dreams, Lily spoke freely, her thoughts spilling like vibrant colors onto a canvas. But in reality, her silence weighed heavily, like a haunting reminder of the accident that stole her voice and shaken safety. Daniel looked at Lily, her big, brown eyes shimmering with a mix of confusion and love. She was drawing shapes in the dirt with a stick, looking up at him occasionally, as if she could sense his turmoil. Could he really drag her into the ugly world of confrontation? The thought curdled his stomach with fear. Would it hurt her more to face what lay below the surface? A piece of his heart ached for the life he once had: a stable job, a home, a daughter who laughed instead of simply watching life unfold in silence. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The thought of the CEO only tightened the grip around his heart. What if Daniel revealed the truth about how this man had profited off the backs of those like him? An art exhibition could scream their narrative into the silence, a chance to show the world the pain behind closed doors, not just their own, but countless others forced into the shadows. Yet what if it backfired? Would he lose everything? That question gnawed at him, a parasite in his mind. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Daniel clenched his fists, the turmoil rising with the darkness around him. His hands shook, and he could almost feel the weight of judgment from passers-by, their indifferent glances cutting deeper than he cared to admit. A thought echoed as despair seeped into his resolve: what if his risk to expose the truth only put them in harm's way? The sting of uncertainty drew tears to his eyes, but he refused to let them fall. He had to decide: cower in silence forever, or step into the fire for the sake of his daughter. And just as the siren call of hope rang in his ears, the shadows loomed larger, whispering of consequence, a dark cloud overhead that threatened to engulf them both. Could he bear the risk to find Lily's voice? The answer lay just beyond his reach, but as he thought of her silent smile, he knew he was on the brink of something both terrifying and necessary. The air felt electric as Daniel rose from the bench, a surge of determination quickening his pace. He couldn't remain trapped in indecision any longer. The weight of responsibility hung on his shoulders, not just for himself, but for Lily, his silent warrior battling her own demons. He could sense the stirring of a deep-rooted flame inside. After so long, it was time to pour fuel on it. His mind raced as possibilities opened to him. What if his art, once dismissed, served a purpose far greater than his own? As he walked with Lily beside him, her little hand in his, he began to visualize this art exhibition, not merely as a showcase for his work, but as a powerful statement against the injustice that suffocated so many. Each stroke of his brush would be a voice against the silence, a cry from the hidden communities trapped in the web woven by the CEO's greed. He could transform the darkness into a cathartic canvas, a vivid representation of struggle, resilience, and hope, his own little revolution. But what would it cost him? The thought loomed like a specter. Did he even possess the courage to confront the CEO? Memories flooded back: late nights spent sketching ideas, rejected pitches, and disappointed clients. The sting of past failures gnawed at him, threatening to undermine his newly kindled hope. There had been moments when he hesitated to unveil his work, afraid of judgment, yet the thought of Lily's silence fueled his resolve. Now that at home, he knelt beside her as she played with clay, molding shapes. "Lily," he began, trembling slightly. The seriousness of his voice caught her attention, those innocent, expectant eyes urging him forward. "What if I told you that I'm going to create something special? Something that could change everything?" She looked up, clenching her little fist around the clay, caught between confusion and curiosity. Perhaps in her own way, she sensed his urgency. An idea flashed in Daniel's mind. He could engage Lily not just as his daughter, but as his artistic muse. Together, they could create. That night, surrounded by dim light, they worked side by side. Daniel sketched furiously, pouring his heart into every line, each symbol a plea for intimacy with his daughter. He encouraged Becky's little fingers to mold the clay, teaching her about emotions through touch and texture. Days turned into weeks, and their small living room gradually morphed into a chaotic studio filled with sculptures and painted canvases. Brothers and sisters intertwined through his art, whispered tales of neglect and misplaced priorities igniting the purpose of every stroke. Daniel learned a new facet of himself, embracing vulnerability, discovering courage he didn't know he possessed. Each sculptural form began to take on significance, he could feel their weights in his bones. However, the looming decision remained unaddressed. Could he summon the courage to face the CEO? The culmination of their artistic journey demanded an avenue where others could see the raw honesty in their experiences. An idea sparked in him. The exhibition needed a platform, a way to propel their voice beyond their intimate circle. Just when he began to feel that familiar thrill of hope, a flicker of doubt swept over him. What if it wasn't enough? What if they failed to elicit change? The weight of ambition was heavy on his chest, almost suffocating. Standing beside Lily, he resolved to take the next step. They would invite others, artists and survivors, to join their cause, creating a tapestry of experiences that couldn't be ignored. As he envisioned walking into the CEO's office with a sense of purpose, the door creaked open, revealing a world of possibilities and uncertainties. The moment was near. Could he not only find Lily's voice but also translate a chorus of silenced anguish into something powerful? He took a deep breath, heart racing. Daniel felt the unmistakable pull of destiny urging him toward an inevitable confrontation. The time had come to face the wall of cruelty head-on. And so, with every bit of resolve, he stepped forward, ready to write the next chapter of their story. Daniel's heart thrummed like a war drum as he set foot on the polished floors of the corporate high-rise, each step echoing within the cavernous atrium. The imposing glass walls felt like a fortress, and the daunting task ahead loomed larger than he ever imagined. The boardroom was a mere elevator ride away, yet it felt miles away from the comfort of their art-filled home. Anxiety clawed at him as he recalled the night's labor with Lily, the sweat, the tears, the art that now represented hope and resilience. Could he fortify that hope into a tangible confrontation capable of destabilizing the complacency of those who wielded power? The elevator chimed, snapping him back to reality. As the doors slid open, a wave of self-doubt washed over him. What if his work, their collective efforts, only came across as desperate attempts to be heard? He shook the thoughts away. There was no room for retreat now. Lily's innocence demanded that he stand tall, to advocate not only for her but for all those who had fought against a tide of neglect. Navigating the imposing hallways, he passed sleek offices filled with high-powered execs, individuals who had forgotten what it was to be vulnerable. The contrast stung. His own experiences acted like layers of paint, each with its story, each stroke heavy with emotion. He steeled himself as he finally stood in front of the door marked with the CEO's name. This was it. He was ready to unhinge that door. Inside, the office was as stark and sterile as he imagined, the CEO's aura of detachment palpable. Daniel sucked in a breath, grounding himself in thoughts of Lily as he pushed the door open. The CEO looked up from behind an expensive desk, a disinterested furrow forming in his brow. He was just another man in power, and that alone was infuriating. "Daniel," the CEO said flatly, as if he were merely acknowledging a nameless employee. What brings you here today? Daniel's words tangled in his throat. He could either let the moment pass or harness it. I'm here to discuss how art can amplify voices that have been silenced, he stated steadily. A glint of surprise flickered across the CEO's face, but it quickly dissipated. And why should that matter to me? The dismissiveness was a wall Daniel had anticipated, but it stung nonetheless that he recalled Lily's vulnerability, her artistic spirit yearning for expression beneath the weight of their circumstances. The thought fueled him. Because, Mr. Carr, art has the power to reveal truths you refuse to see. My daughter, for instance, hasn't spoken since everything changed. But through our art, we are exploring ways to give her language again. We have stories worth sharing. Challenge ignited in Daniel's chest. He thrust his sketches onto the desk, their vivid narratives made tangible. Each piece challenges the world's indifference. I believe we can create a dialogue around them. The CEO frowned, glancing over the works. Daniel's heart raced, he could almost feel the weight of judgment in the air. Would he be seen as an artist with a vision or just another imposter lost in a corporate maze? And why should I care about your daughter's silence? Carr's tone dripped with condescension. Daniel's world narrowed down to that question. Coupled with the weight of the CEO's derision, it transformed the uncertainty into fiery resolve. Because her silence is a reflection of countless others who have been overlooked in your rise to the top. My art isn't just for me or Lily, it's a plea for justice for the voiceless. As the CEO shifted uneasily, uncertainty creeping into his eyes, Daniel realized the power of his voice had shifted the momentum. This was not merely a confrontation, it was a declaration, yet doubt crept back in, an undercurrent that whispered of failure. What if this confrontation ended in dismissal? He wrestled with the fear that clawed at his resolve. Let us hear more, the CEO finally said, leaning back in his chair, intrigued but maintaining an air of skepticism. In a single moment, tension rose, turning into a battleground for belief and disbelief. Daniel took a deep breath, channeling every ounce of strength he could summon as he prepared to lay bare the intricate truths behind each piece of art. The stakes were high, but so was their potential for change. Could a collection of colors, shapes, and stories compel this man to see the importance of voices silenced? With each word, Daniel's vulnerability transformed into an indomitable plea, one that he felt could topple the fortress of indifference before him. And just as those hopes stretched towards the heavens, he felt the ground shake beneath him, a reminder that in the realm of power, one must always be prepared for the unexpected. What other obstacles awaited him in the pursuit of advocacy? Would their voices find the resonance they sought, or was this just the prelude to a deeper confrontation? Daniel felt the weight of the sketches on the table, their colors vibrant yet loaded with the shadows of despair and struggle. Each stroke commanded attention, not solely for their aesthetic value but for the stories that bled through the canvas, stories of silence, voicelessness, and the timeless human desire for connection. He drew in a breath, summoning the courage he'd need for the journey ahead. Mr. Carr, he began, his voice steadying as he reclaimed his authority, these pieces are not merely expressions of creativity, they embody the struggle to communicate when all avenues seem closed. He stepped forward, allowing his passion to seep into the space between them. This is Lost in Sound. In it, I tried to capture the chaotic noise of a world that overlooks those who don't perfectly fit the mold. Each brushstroke represents a moment of frustration faced by individuals who exist in silence, desperate to be heard. My daughter is one of those voices. The CEO's gaze flickered from the sketch to Daniel, a hint of intrigue dancing in his otherwise aloof demeanor. The sunlight streaming through the glass walls reflected off the crisp edges of the art pieces, illuminating their relevance. Daniel pressed on, the urgency within him blooming like a wildflower determined to break through cracks in concrete. This piece, Echoes of Tenderness, illustrates the gentle moments where communication happens without words, through touch, through gestures. After her trauma, Lily created a language of her own, a beautiful yet bittersweet dance of expression that defies her silence. Can you imagine the potential if we could expand that language, show it to the world? His eyes burned with intensity, and for the first time since stepping into the high-rise, he felt a surge of hope. Carr crossed his arms, the skepticism still lingering but slowly melting. And you see how this contributes to my business model? How does a few sketches touch the bottom line? Daniel stiffened. It would be easy to falter and retreat into the comfort of self-doubt. Yet he felt the embers of resilience fueled by Lily's spirit. Because, sir, understanding and compassion are your most untapped markets. Show the world that your corporation can champion the vulnerable, and it's not just good business but also forward-thinking leadership. Those who support art that speaks for the marginalized are aligning themselves with a legacy of change. A flicker of consideration crossed Carr's face, and Daniel seized that moment. This wasn't solely a pitch, it was an opportunity to reshape narratives, to step wholly into the role of advocate. The exchange deepened as Carr flipped through the sketches, a newfound curiosity emerging. You really believe that art can bridge this gap? Speak to those who refuse to listen. It must, Daniel implored, his resolve solidifying. Art has the capacity to bypass the cynicism of the palate, to shatter the apathy clouding our daily lives. In a time where emotional connection feels at odds with corporate priorities, what if we made vulnerability a point of discussion? A connection can spark change, it can illuminate the unconscious biases that have long persisted. Silence blanketed the room. Daniel dared to hold Carr's eyes, silently pleading for understanding, for a way forward. A bead of sweat trickled down the side of his neck, visceral tension surging as the CEO weighed his options. The corporate titan finally broke the silence. So what do you propose we do then? Daniel's heart raced, knowing the words he was about to voice could either pave the way for unprecedented visibility or plunge him back into obscurity. He felt a compulsion to deliver an offer both revolutionary and concrete, a collaboration that could merge his artistry with the corporate machine. We start a campaign, one that centers around the stories of silence. Document Lily's journey through art. Create a platform for others who have been muted by circumstance and society. Show the world that while they may not hear our voices, they should see our stories. As he spoke, he could almost feel the pulse of possibility thrumming in the air. Yet beneath that fervor thrived a nagging question: could he convince this man to risk his reputation for the sake of truth and vulnerability? Daniel's words hung heavily, saturated with the essence of ambition and hope. But he was fully aware that the battle was far from won, it was merely just beginning. Would he be met with resistance or the acknowledgement he sought for both Lily and all those like her? As Carr's brow furrowed, the room vibrated with the promise of tension, the scales of conviction teetering on the line between opportunity and retreat. How much influence would Daniel hold in a game played by the powerful? The stakes loomed larger, and time stretched infinitely, leaving Daniel to wonder if this moment would be the catalyst for the change they desperately needed or just another echo in the void. Carr's eyes narrowed, evaluating Daniel as if he were a puzzle to be solved. The air thickened with the unsaid, and every heartbeat amplified Daniel's growing anxiety. He shifted his stance, trying to project confidence despite the internal tempest swirling within him. How had he come to stake everything on the fragile bridge of a corporate alliance? Listen, Daniel, Carr finally spoke, voice even but cloaked in sharpness. You're passionate, and I admire that. But you're asking for a lot. You're asking me to risk not just resources but reputational capital. I have stakeholders to consider. Not everyone is going to buy into the emotional narrative you're proposing. The weight of those words settled like a stone in Daniel's stomach. Each syllable felt like a suffocating layer, binding him to doubt. But beneath that weight, an ember of defiance ignited. If those who wield influence shy away from vulnerability, they deprive themselves of the potential to connect with a broader audience, he asserted, his voice steadying with conviction. But that's a risk, Carr replied, his skepticism cloaked in the guise of practicality. You're talking about pushing boundaries when most of the industry focuses on safe investments. It's not just about empathy, it's also about profitability. The starkness of his response cut through Daniel's aspirations like a knife. In that moment, the shimmering ideal of partnership dangled precariously before him. He was in uncharted territory, where his raw ambition collided with the cold calculus of corporate decision-making. He took a breath, determined to navigate this tension. "Then let us start small," Daniel proposed, trying to recalibrate the conversation. "A pilot project. Something that doesn't commit you fully but allows us to test the waters. We can merge storytelling with your brand ethos. We can create a narrative that resonates on both an emotional and commercial level." The words tumbled out, tinged with urgency, frantically fanning the flames of his hope. Carr leaned back, contemplating. "And what does that look like, exactly?" "Visual art in unexpected places," Daniel suggested, heart pounding as the desperation kissed the boundaries of his pitch. "Immersive exhibits that invite interaction where people can confront their biases about disability. We could organize events that foster discussion and generate interest while still highlighting the artistry. Show potential clients that your brand isn't afraid to showcase the full spectrum of the human experience." For a heartbeat, Daniel's vision felt tangible, like ink scripts on paper waiting to be unfurled. Carr's brow furrowed once more, yet the flicker of intrigue remained, sparking a notion that perhaps, just perhaps, this concept could be more than a mere gamble. "What's in it for us?" Carr finally asked, his tone slightly softer. Beneath the layers of his detached veneer, Daniel detected an inkling of curiosity. Daniel seized the opportunity, ready to shift the narrative from vulnerable aspirations to strategic advantage. "We align with social consciousness. We position your corporation as a leader in ethical marketing, gaining customer loyalty from those who wish to support meaningful endeavors. The longer we postpone addressing our unspoken biases, the longer we allow apathy to thrive. We could ignite a movement." Carr's silence hung heavily, but Daniel noticed a subtle shift. The CEO's eyes narrowed as the ideas churned in his mind. Yet as the possibility danced tantalizingly close, a shadow of doubt scuttled through Daniel's consciousness. Had he overstepped? The fine line between ambition and desperation seemed to close in around him. "I'll put together a proposal," Carr finally said, but his tone left room for interpretation. "We can see if it warrants further discussion, although I can't guarantee." The interruption sat heavy between them, stitching Daniel's doubt into a complex tapestry of hope and apprehension. Now the weight of uncertainty felt palpable. Would this initiative weaken his resolve if the answer were no? "And if it doesn't?" Daniel asked quietly, the fear of rejection unearthing itself from the deep recesses of his mind. Carr's expression hardened once more, revealing the stark reality. This was the corporate arena and poignant visions often crumbled under the pressure of practicality. "That's just how business works," he said matter-of-factly. As the conversation stretched toward its inevitable close, Daniel felt a tightening knot in his chest, a realization forming like clouds before a storm. He had ventured deeper into a labyrinth of corporate machinations than he had ever intended. The stakes were unfolding dramatically, illuminating not just a path for others but exposing vulnerabilities in his own resolve. What would happen next? Could he maintain his vision in a space where voices often drowned beneath the clamor for profit? The tension mounted. His personal quest entwined with professional endeavor now was an arena that sought to test his very core. If this was the beginning of a partnership, then he would need to brace himself. Reality had its own rules, and mastering the complexities of this world would define the next chapter, not just for Lily, but for him as well. Would he fight through the rejections and doubts that lay ahead, or allow the allure of compromise to blur the lines he had fought so hard to establish? In this crucible of potential and peril, the true measure of Daniel's growth was just about to unfold. Daniel turned away from the meeting room, heart racing, determination battling the rising tide of self-doubt. Each step he took down the polished corridor felt heavier than the last, echoing the recognition of how precarious his dreams had become. The high-stakes game of corporate alliances was cruel, and he was just another player grappling for leverage. He had entered the realm of influence, but now he wasn't certain it was a discipline he could master. The conceptualization that once ignited a fire within him now flickered uncertainly, dimmed by Carr's reality check. As he reached the elevator, Daniel's reflection in the chrome doors showed not only his physical exhaustion but the dawning awareness that he was grappling with something much bigger: his identity as a leader, as a visionary. The ride down felt interminable. He let the cool metal of the handrail ground him as he thought feverishly about Carr's skepticism. Was it too ambitious to believe that art could evoke empathy? Or was he merely romanticizing a concept that had little place in the realm of corporate profitability? The questions twisted inside him like a dark ocean, threatening to drown out his resolve. Emerging into the bustling street, the familiar chaos enveloped him, cars honking, pedestrians rushing by, their lives flowing with purpose. He watched the world go about its business, everyone's focus sharpened on their individual pursuits. He felt small and inconsequential. For a moment, he was reminded of his childhood when he had watched others chase after dreams that felt impossibly distant, hidden behind layers of privilege. What was different now? He was older, wiser, and armed with an intention that had the potential to reshape perceptions. And yet, the nagging question haunted him: was he capable of seeing this through, of overcoming the barriers built by corporate cynicism? Would the passion he held so dearly withstand the scrutiny of those who valued profit over purpose? He began walking aimlessly, each step an attempt to crystallize his thoughts. The chaos began to evolve into a rhythm that propelled him forward. In every glance at the city's vibrancy, he found pieces of himself: artisans crafting their trades, street performers captivating audiences. Each moment pulsated with stories waiting to be unveiled. That clarity jolted him. If they could bare their souls to a transient audience, why couldn't he? As he approached a small open gallery on the corner, an idea flickered to life. What if he sought to transform vulnerability into strength, leveraging the art surrounding him as a living testament to resilience? He moved through the gallery, eyes scanning the intricate pieces that conveyed myriad emotions. Inspiration surged within, the thought that art could be a vessel to evoke dialogue burning like a beacon. He reached for his phone, pulling up notes and sketches he had brushed aside in the wake of Carr's skepticism. A new proposal began to form in his mind, one that would pair art with personal narratives, intertwining personal stories with the broader theme of societal challenges. It would humanize the corporate message Carr held so dear, making it palpable and relatable. The whirl of thoughts crystallized into a vision. Daniel pictured a showcase of art intertwined with live storytelling, where each piece would not only represent creativity but also a struggle shared. A raw, beautiful lens through which he could illuminate lives often relegated to the shadows. The gallery could be a safe haven for discussions that broke stifling silences, a bridge towards cultivating deeper understanding. There was a shift in his core, a subtle but undeniable strengthening. He regained focus as he jotted down thoughts and ideas, drawing closer with each stroke of the pen to a solid proposal. This was not merely about resistance but about crafting a compelling narrative, a challenge that could inspire those in power to confront their biases. But could this be enough to sway Carr? Would he see the vision that sprung from Daniel's heart, the commitment rooted in personal history? The stakes felt undeniable. The time had come to embrace vulnerability as a strength, to weave hope through storytelling in a world that often erred on the side of detachment. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows on the pavement, Daniel stood still within the gallery, feeling a sense of purpose rising within, a newfound clarity that transcended the doubts he had harbored. His heart pounded with the potential of what lay ahead and the journey to reclaim not just his vision but his voice, but the ultimate revelation loomed heavily in the air. Would Carr's skepticism harden into resistance, or would he dare to embrace an approach that could alter their paradigm entirely? The moment of truth was drawing near, and the curtain on his aspirations was about to rise. Daniel stepped out of the gallery, the fading light casting a long shadow over his path. He clutched his notes tightly, practically feeling the weight of the paper imbued with his newly formed vision. The air felt electric around him, as if the city breathed in tandem with his determination. But beneath the surface was a foreboding sense of urgency. He needed to act swiftly before doubt could creep back in. With each stride, the gravity of his unfolding narrative began to sink in. He was not just creating a presentation, but stitching together a piece of himself and the voices he had yet to hear. The thrill of it thrilled him, yet Carr's critical gaze lingered ominously at the back of his mind. Realizing he couldn't navigate this path alone, Daniel pulled out his phone, scrolling through his contacts until he found a name that had always been a steady lighthouse in his stormy seas: Mia, his closest friend and a skilled graphic designer. She had a keen sense for aesthetics that could breathe life into his proposal. He pressed the call button, feeling a bead of sweat form at his brow as he paced the sidewalk. "Hey, it's me," Mia answered, her voice warm and familiar. "Mia, I need your help," he said, urgency punctuating his words. "I have this idea about pairing art with raw personal stories. It could bridge the gap between empathy and corporate messaging." But he hesitated, considering the vulnerability of exposing his thoughts. "You what?" she prompted, ready to catch him. "I want to create a presentation. One that shows how we can humanize our message, not just profit from it. I think I can spark change, but I need your artistic vision to make it resonant. Will you help me?" A few heartbeats of silence passed. He could almost hear her processing the magnitude of his request. "Of course, Daniel. When do we start?" Her enthusiasm ignited his resolve, washing over his doubts like a fresh tide. That evening, surrounded by scattered sketches, coffee cups, and hushed conversations of inspiring narratives, Daniel felt invigorated. Mia's designs began to take shape, illustrations dancing brilliantly alongside his words. Together, they aimed to evoke emotion, to challenge resistance, to foster dialogues that deepen connections. Each piece of art in the proposal represented not just a concept but a life story, an opportunity for the viewer to step into someone else's shoes, to feel the warmth of connection over cold detachment. Daniel immersed himself in weaving together facts with anecdotes, ensuring that each photograph, each image, reflected the rawness of lived experience that he lost track of time, the world outside fading away as they worked late into the night. But the closer he came to solidifying the presentation, the more apprehensive he became about Carr's potential reaction. Would he see past the flashy designs? Would he grasp the gravity of using genuine narratives to connect on a human level? When they finally stepped back to review their work, exhaustion mingled with exhilaration. The display was complete, an amalgamation of heart and artistry, a bold proclamation of values that transcended mere profit. Yet, a flickering fear still lingered in Daniel's chest. Was he ready to expose not just his ideas, but his vulnerabilities? As they prepared for the upcoming pitch, Daniel could feel the electricity in the air again, but this time it was laced with the shivers of anticipation. The presentation wasn't just about the art, it was a representation of his journey, a journey from fear to empowerment, from silence to voice. But just as clarity settled within him, doubts flickered back. What if Carr's cynicism extinguished the hope he had cultivated? What if, rather than embrace his vision, Carr rejected it outright, labeling it as merely fluff? Daniel swallowed hard, the stakes higher than before. As the day of the pitch loomed ahead, so did the daunting realization that he was about to confront not only Carr but the most uncertain parts of himself. The moment of truth was near, a threshold he could no longer avoid. Could he really change the perspective of those entrenched in corporate dogma? The very thought sent a thrill down his spine. It was a risk worth taking, but as the dawn approached, enveloping the city in a veil of muted colors, one question crystallized within him: would he rise to the challenge or shrink back into the shadows of doubt? The answer waited just beyond the horizon, shrouded in uncertainty. The day of the pitch arrived, an ominous cloud looming over Daniel's anticipation. The big glass conference room, polished and cold, greeted him as he entered. It felt like walking into a lion's den, the tension palpable against his skin. Mia had suggested that they arrive early to familiarize themselves with the space, but nothing could quell the rising tide of anxiety within him. As he set up his presentation, he glanced at the massive screen ready to display his work. His carefully constructed narratives hovered behind his eyelids, vivid and fragile. Yet, Carr's reputation as a relentless critic echoed through his mind, a chilling reminder that the success of this presentation wasn't merely about artistry. It reflected a shift in corporate ideology, a challenge to orthodoxy that ran deep. "Remember, Daniel," Mia said softly, breaking into his reverie. "This isn't about perfection. It's about the message." Her confidence washed over him like balm, easing some of his worries. That he nodded, but doubt barbed his thoughts. Was he strong enough to confront Carr? The man exuded a power that could crush aspirations with just a word. Daniel took a deep breath, he wasn't just presenting art. He was laying bare a part of himself, passions, fears, and hopes all tangled together in this singular moment. As his colleagues slouched into their chairs, a murmur of speculative whispers filled the room. Daniel's heart raced as he walked to the front, notes in hand, feeling the weight of every smile and frown directed his way. Carr's sharp eyes, calculating and poised, seemed to dissect him even before he spoke. "Good morning, everyone," Daniel began, his own voice steady despite the storm brewing inside. He launched into the core of his presentation, contextualizing the art with compelling stories intertwined with facts. Images flashed onto the screen, each one eliciting reaction: surprise, empathy, a flicker of understanding. Daniel's passion seeped into his words, illuminating the narratives in a way that tangible data never could. As he spoke about the power of connection, a stillness settled over the group, captivating their attention. But midway through, he faltered. His gaze caught Carr, arms crossed and expression impenetrable. The man leaned forward slightly, as if waiting for the moment to strike. Daniel's breath caught. Was he losing them, pushing through? He articulated the crux of his vision: the annihilation of the transactional approach in corporate messaging, replaced by genuine human connection. Daniel felt sweat slicking his palms, the stakes of his plea woven tightly through every syllable. He opened the floor to discussion, determined to engage with their insights and questions. Carr was the first to respond, his voice cutting through Daniel's fervor like a knife. "Interesting, Daniel. But could you explain how this heartwarming initiative translates to measurable success? Because frankly, that's what our shareholders care about." The challenge loomed before him, and for a moment, it felt insurmountable. He could sense the others holding their breath, they were waiting to see how he would react. But instead of collapsing under the weight of Carr's skepticism, something shifted inside him. Clarity surged through him, igniting a tide of determination. "Change isn't always quantifiable," Daniel countered, his voice stronger now, "but it's the real stories behind those numbers that transform empathy into loyalty, that humanize our brand. I'm not asking for abandonment of data, I'm advocating for its marriage with our human experience." As he finished, he felt a subtle shift in the energy of the room. There was a flicker of recognition, the kind that comes when truth resonates deep within. Daniel could see others consider the emotional heft of his words, but as silence hung heavily in the air, a new wave of doubt crossed his mind. Would they not only understand but embrace this new perspective? Would Carr? He prepared himself for any reaction, hoping to quell his escalating anxiety. The stakes were no longer just professional, they echoed with personal significance. With each heartbeat, Daniel stood in that moment, ready to face either acceptance or rejection. What would it mean for his journey, his growth, if Carr decided to rip apart his vision? Suddenly, the room was abuzz with murmurs, the air thick with tension. The moment seemed to stretch into infinity, leaving Daniel at the precipice of revelation. Had he just sparked a significant change, or was he about to witness his aspirations crumble? The answer awaited him, teetering on the edge of that very question. The tension in the room thickened, each heartbeat pressing against Daniel's chest as murmurs swelled and ebbed like a tide. He scanned the faces gathering energy, a mix of intrigue and skepticism, and felt the pulse of both hope and fear. Carr's silence loomed larger than ever, a chasm ready to engulf him if he misstepped. Drawing a deep breath, Daniel turned his focus inward, where reflection collided with urgency. He recalled the countless hours spent refining every detail, envisioning a narrative that transcended the confines of cold, corporate lingo. What if this was just the beginning? He mused internally, digging deeper for the courage to defend his perspective. This could pave the way not only for his career but also for others to perceive business through a more profound, human lens. "Daniel." Carr's voice sliced through the murmurs, loud and authoritative. "Are you suggesting that we gamble on emotional resonance over profitability? That sounds risky, perhaps even reckless." "No," Daniel replied, surprising himself with the conviction in his tone. "It's not about gambling. It's about integrating the human element into our strategies to enrich engagement." Watching Carr squint, Daniel felt a spark of defiance. Was it recklessness to demand something more meaningful from his craft? It was clear Carr wasn't just scrutinizing the proposal, he aimed to diminish Daniel's resolve. Yet, in that encroaching darkness, a flicker of clarity emerged. What if this moment could become not merely a battle of ideas, but an opportunity to redefine his role to embody the spirit of change he advocated? He envisioned shifting the narrative from numbers to people, proving that connection could indeed lead to brand loyalty, transforming the potential risk into strategic foresight. Think of brands that connect on an emotional level, Daniel pressed on, urgency lacing his words. Apple, Nike, even smaller names they've made reputations not just through products but through storytelling. Their success is rooted in understanding the audience's core desires and values. The room shifted, eyes darting between Carr and Daniel, a palpable tension forming as he continued. Our vision can resonate beyond quarterly reports. I'm not saying to discard metrics, but integrate them with the authentic touch that speaks to consumers. This approach can ultimately drive the revenue we seek. He couldn't ignore the trembling in his hands, the weight of his words accentuated by the watchful gaze of Carr. But he found solace in a hidden strength, his ambitions intertwined with the notion that real progress often demanded vulnerability. As he wrapped up his argument, he could sense the atmosphere transform, a hint of contemplation breaking Carr's stoic front. Yet doubt warred within Daniel. Was this enough to sway the critical eye? Interesting perspective, Daniel, Carr said finally, the slight raise of an eyebrow suggesting both acknowledgement and critique. But let us be honest, will the board embrace this sentimental approach? Despite the pressure, determination welled within him. This isn't merely sentimental, it's strategic insight grounded in a deeper understanding of our customers. It's about being at the forefront of shifting paradigms. As he observed Carr pondering his words, Daniel felt the gravity of the moment crystallize. He had stepped into a new realm of professional courage, a place where conviction met strategy. It wasn't just about winning a pitch, it was about embedding a philosophy within the company ethos. Yet, as tension once again cloaked the room, Daniel braced himself for Carr's response, a sense of foreboding creeping in. Would his newfound resolve hold under scrutiny? This crucial dialogue felt like an inflection point not only for their project but for his personal evolution. As Carr's lips parted, ready to respond, Daniel's heart raced. Should he ready himself for approval or impending challenge? The outcome of this showdown would either illuminate a pathway forward or cast shadows on the ambitions he sought to forge. The next words Carr would utter hung in the air, and within that silence, a reckoning awaited. What determination could ignite next? Weeks later, as Daniel prepared for the art exhibition that would display not just his work, but the collective voices of silence, he felt a deep sense of purpose and pride shimmer within him. The exhibition wouldn't merely showcase beautiful art, it represented the journey he had taken with Lily, the battle fought against apathy, and the faces of those who felt overlooked by society. Each canvas, each sculpture, was a testament to resilience and a plea to be acknowledged. The night of the exhibition arrived, and the venue buzzed with energy. Friends, family, and even those from the corporate world who had expressed interest in Carr's new vision gathered in anticipation. As the lights dimmed, Daniel stepped forward to speak, his heart pounding with excitement and nerves. Standing before the audience, he took a moment to embrace the significance of this gathering. Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight. This isn't merely an exhibition, it's a movement. Through our art, we aim not only to visualize silence but to amplify the voices that demand to be heard, he declared, his voice unwavering. That he felt a rush of confidence. This was a moment of culmination, not just reflecting his personal journey but forging connections with those around him. Observing Lily in the corner, her wide eyes sparkling with awe as she delicately shaped new clay creations, Daniel recognized how far they had come. He had transformed from a man weighed down by uncertainty to one who used his art as a catalyst for empowerment and change. Daniel spoke passionately about each piece. This is lost in sound, a reminder of the chaos people endure when their voices are stifled. The vibrant colors represent the emotions that often go unseen, while the fragmented shapes illustrate the barriers society builds. He articulated how each piece told a story: his story, Lily's struggle, and the collective narratives of many who existed in silence. The audience listened intently, engaged and moved. Through the passion in his voice, he unraveled the threads that had at one time bound him, transforming vulnerability into strength. The corporate leaders who once seemed so far removed now leaned in, eager to understand this new approach that intertwined empathy and business. As the night progressed, he could feel the energy shift in the room. Questions flowed, discussions ignited, and those present began to grasp not just the artistry but the profound need for change. This was no ordinary exhibition, it was a disruption of the status quo, a challenge to those who had the power to effect change within corporate structures. When Carr approached him, Daniel braced himself. Would this be another test of resolve? Instead, Carr looked genuinely impressed. "You've managed to pull it off, Daniel. The response is more positive than I anticipated," he admitted, a hint of admiration creeping into his demeanor. As Daniel watched the CEO engage with the art, deeply reflecting on the emotions laid bare, he realized that he had successfully shifted the narrative. No longer was art dismissed as frivolous, it had become a conduit for genuine connection, a bridge between corporate aspirations and human experiences. In that moment, standing amidst vibrant canvases and those who shared whispers of silent battles, Daniel felt a weight lift. He had proven to himself, and to Carr, that art mattered, that stories of struggle held value beyond profit margins. The journey hadn't been easy, but he had stepped into his power and transformed not just his life, but the lives of others in the process. As the night drew to a close, smiles exchanged, and heartfelt connections created, Daniel felt a sense of fulfillment wash over him. He had conquered self-doubt, he had risen to a position where he could advocate for respect and understanding through the ingenuity of vulnerability. His purpose had solidified, and Lily's silent strength had become a clarion call. This exhibition was the first of many, a launching point rather than an end. He had achieved a deep-seated resolution, to champion the stories that deserved to be seen and heard, to turn silence into solidarity. He turned toward Lily, kneeling to her level. "Tonight, we did it. Together, we voiced what was once unspoken," he whispered, pride swelling within him. Her bright smile, free from confusion, affirmed that they had indeed crossed a threshold, emerging not just as artist and muse, but as two courageous warriors, reshaping the world around them. Daniel knew that the fight for voice and visibility would continue, but now, he did so with the unwavering confidence that came from genuine achievement. He had become a respected figure in the art and corporate world, recognized for not only his creative talents but the courage that drove him to challenge the very essence of silence. In this moment, Daniel had proven to himself and others that art could be a force for change, a necessity rather than an accessory. With every stroke on a canvas, he linked past pain with present purpose, and in doing so, he gave Lily, and countless others, a reason to hope. You need to subscribe now for more exclusive emotional stories that push boundaries and inspire transformation. Leave a like now to fuel the passion in these narratives. Seriously, it makes a huge difference. Comment your reactions and theories about Daniel's journey and what the future holds for him and Lily. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to feel the weight of these stories of overcoming. Don't wait even one more second to share. The time is now to spread hope, strength, and resilience.